The shock of my parents' death lingered in my mind, and the pain continued. My wife and brothers all needed a break. It occurred to me that people who needed a break more than anyone else were my wife and sisters-in-law. I went on a trip to Bali, Indonesia, with my wife, leaving everything. Denpasar Airport, which I looked down on from the sky, was very beautiful. The view of the beach from the hotel was fascinating. It was a scene I saw in a 007 movie. I had been abroad for business several times, but it was my first trip for sightseeing. There were many Hindu temples in Bali. Most of the houses had stone towers like altars in their yards, and bird-shaped spires hung in front of their doors. They worshiped most of nature as gods. Not only cows, but also high mountains, and fish were gods they worshipped. It would have been the way they needed to live, with nature as their religion. I could see young men looking at the tourists with their eyes drooping under the shade. The unemployment problem seemed serious there, too. A young man ran towards us like a roe deer with bare feet. He came up to the van with the tourists and held up a newspaper. One of the tourists looked at the newspaper with a curious eye. "Here's a Korean newspaper." "Oh, but this newspaper is a few days old." When the travelers in the van burst into laughter, he smiled with a black face and white teeth. I bought a newspaper out of sympathy for him, and I thought he was a fine young man. I remembered that I stopped delivering newspaper after a few days when I was in high school. The Bali people seemed to lack all supplies except for tropical fruits. Some residents went barefoot because they did not have shoes. Every time our van arrived in the tourist area, a dozen merchants came and sold things competitively. They were living a difficult life that I had never seen before. I felt that Korea was a good country to live in no matter how difficult it was. A local guide told us where we were visiting next. "Next, we are going to a pearl store ran by a Korean. You don't have to buy anything." One of the tourists looked for a yellow pearl. "I went around the stores to get it in Gangnam, Seoul, but I did not see it there." Yellow pearls were also expensive in Bali. I looked at my wife's face. My wife could not even dare to touch the pearl just by looking at it. 20 years after I got married, I had never given her a small ring as a present, so she deserved it. "Pick the necklace you want." My wife's eyes widened at my words. The clerk put a double-decker necklace made of natural pearls from the South Seas on my wife's neck. "Put those earrings on too." My wife got a yellow pearl earring and put it in her ears. She married me with a troubled family and never lived at ease. I felt sorry that I made her choose a spouse who was in a difficult family, and she lived a hard life since marrying me. I wanted to make amends to my wife for trying to protect and take care of the whole family. Although I had been struggling the whole time because my home environment was not so good, I think I was lucky to always have a job. In March 2004, I changed jobs. Daesun Group was doing cogeneration projects and opened an energy service company along with several new businesses. The group proposed me to be an executive in charge of the projects. I had no professional knowledge of the cogeneration project and felt burdened by the lack of economic feasibility of the project. On the other hand, I wanted to work for a socially recognized company. I decided to put everything aside and change my job because Chairman Kim, who I admired, called me. I felt that Chairman Kim was an enterpriser who was gentle and had a great deal of philosophical knowledge. But the business I worked for did not pay off very well. Fortunately, my company was selected as a CES, Community Energy Supply System, operator for medium-sized residential areas in the provinces. There were conflicts with the employees who worked together during the course of the project. Most of the staff were not interested in small local businesses. They were trying to do bigger businesses in the metropolitan area, but there were no results. Furthermore, bad loans continued to occur, and the machine we supplied to the client broke down several times. It is a very difficult task to make a new business a stable one. It was not easy for a newly started business to create a profit model and make money. Furthermore, it was very difficult for me, who had no experience in developing a business. Until then, driving on without stopping, I had been promoted from my job, but I finally pressed the brakes myself. I was afraid of failing there. I was very confused at a time when I was still suffering from the shock of losing my parents. I could not sleep. After a week of sleepless nights, I became very sensitive, and the people around me seemed to be deliberately driving me to collapse. I felt as if a foreigner, whose name was unknown, was going to hurt my wife. Someone seemed to tap my phone and to be watching me. I felt like someone was going to hurt my family one by one. I was afraid of the world and scared of people. In the evening, I did not want to watch TV or even think about anything, so I would go to bed early. Yet, I could not sleep more. I could not control my own thoughts, even though I promised myself that nothing I worried about would happen. My wife cried and said to me, "You are so exhausted. You need a break." My wife asked me to go to the hospital. I did not want to go to the hospital. I know I was mentally exhausted, but I thought I could get over it myself. My wife shed tears when I worshiped at the church. I could see tears fall down below her eyes like raindrops. Until then, I did not realize the tears were so big. Her eyes literally burst into tears. I made up my mind not to let her shed tears anymore, and I went to the hospital to follow the advice of my wife and younger brothers. The reorganization was carried out. The chairman asked me to work for an affiliate in the provinces. He said he would give me a year off because he cared about me. If I had not been transferred to a local affiliate at the time, I would have not been able to endure every day. Living in the provinces was not easy at first. It felt like joining the army again in the mountains of Gangwon-do. My cell phone was silent every day. At that time, almost everyone around me did not contact me, as if my social life was over. Most of my classmates, who used to ask me to subscribe to magazines or to pressure me to buy things, did not contact me. I felt like I was falling, and I was slowly becoming a forgotten figure to people. I felt dizzy again. Just as my mother endured all the hardships in her life, I vowed to do so myself. My mother seemed to have taught me how to live a strong life through her actions. When I have difficulty mentally overcoming something, I think of my family, especially my mother. When I do work related to my family, I used to decide what to do by keeping my mother in mind. What would my mother think of my behavior? My mother passed away, but I think she is watching from somewhere in heaven. Thinking about my mother makes me feel a little less lonely and distressed. I used to recite Psalms 23:1 and rely on the Bible. Over the years in the provinces, I gradually became more stable. The company had expanded since I started to work for it, and everything personal went smoothly.